Let's deep dive this topic and go behind enemy lines with Alex Schiffer, who writes for The Athletic. I'm here with Chris Forsberg as well. Alex, okay, this is what everyone wants to know. Who are the Nets? Because they seem very Jekyll and Hyde. They could be the team that absolutely stomped on the Cavs early, but they also feel like they could be the team that sort of, quite frankly, half-asses it and lets you get back in it and end up losing the game that way.
You know, you're on a Northeast sports show when there's cursing allowed. I love it. I think the Nets are honestly still trying to figure out who they are, too. I mean, you know, if you're in Boston, I'm trying to remember the movie line, you know, like our true enemy is yet to reveal himself. Like, I think that applies to Brooklyn. You know, they've only had 6-7 games, really, with their main core that doesn't include Ben Simmons or Joe Harris, the latter of whom's out for the year. So really what you've seen these past few games is they're really their first reps with each other as a new group. So, I mean, they're working off a limited sample size and kind of going as the games come.
And I'll say this, like, if Kyrie Irving comes in and makes his first 12 shots, the Nets are going to be tough to beat. Like, I fully relent that. And Kevin Durant is going to win them one game at some point by just being Kevin Durant. But they don't have the depth that they had last season. They don't have quite the defense yet. You know, maybe they can build that up over time. But right now, it's, I mean, obviously 20th in the NBA, and just they don't. And there's not going to be enough time to kind of get that right, no matter if Ben Simmons plays or not. Though we can certainly help them. But so I just go back to it. Like, they're just not as good as they were a year ago, and the Celtics have better depth this year. That doesn't mean that I think it just, we'll wait to see how it plays out. I know I keep getting too bold with my predictions about this series, Trenni.
Yes, a couple days ago, he said it was going to be a gentleman's sweep and it was going to be easy. I'm not sure about that because, Alex, something you said caught my ear. We've all sort of wondered, why haven't the Nets been all that dominant? And a large part of it is what the Celtics dealt with early in the year, right? Like, they just didn't have their core guys playing together on a consistent basis. It took them a while, though, to sort of gel and come together. How quickly can Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and their sort of hodgepodge supporting cast put it together, and can they put it together quickly enough to advance to the second round?
I think that's a tough question to answer because, you know, there's reports out there of Ben Simmons playing at some point in the first round. He's got no history with them. So even, you know, the wheel they're reinventing right now kind of has to get reinvented again whenever he plays in whatever capacity, because he's this dominant player that has no history with the team. So I think there's two versions of the Nets right now, the one we saw last night and the one that they could be with Ben Simmons, and it kind of depends upon which we see in the series. But I think it's just hard in general for a team. You know, there was a stat I looked at last year with the first team with all the injuries. You know, the less continuity you have and less games together as a super team doesn't tend to bode well for your title chances. So, you know, history just isn't on their side.
And the whole notion of flipping switches. I mean, like, look, we lived this. The Celtics in 2018-19, I mean, Kyrie said it a million times. Don't worry, we got this. We're going to figure it out when it matters. I'm here. And then he checked out in the middle of a playoff series against the Bucks. So I go back. That's my big concern, not concern for Boston. My concern for the Nets is that they hit any sort of adversity and Kyrie just sort of mentally checks out. And then it's on Durant to carry this whole thing. And that gets difficult. But, you know, it's undeniable that they have great individual talent. Is that enough to win you 4 out of 7 games? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that individual talent, I think most people are talking about Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. This series does feature a pair of dynamic duos on both teams. Tatum and Durant leading the way, of course, for their respective teams. There is nothing but mutual respect for the opposing superstars, however.
You know, obviously he's, you know, the focal point of their team, and, you know, we got to compete and game plan and things like that to, you know, make it tough for him.
He's one of those players, just got to play hard and see what happens. You know, he's just so talented and skilled and efficient at what he does.
All right, I have to be honest, Alex. I mean, listen, I'm rooting, obviously, for the Celtics. I want them to win. But if you just are looking simply on paper and on history, if you look at the duo that could lead their team surprisingly to the next round and maybe to a title, to me, it's still Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Is that bearing out from what you're seeing? Are they still one of the best, if not the best, tandems in all of the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they've only played together so much because, as Chris was saying, with some of the injuries and whatnot. But, I mean, they're two future Hall of Famers. They're both NBA champions. You know, just from a resume perspective, as talented as I find Jaylen and Jayson to be, they just don't have that yet. I think they'll get there at some point, but they just don't have that right now. So I definitely would take Kevin and Kyrie right now, but in a few years, I could easily be switching my answer on that.
Yeah, and Chris, I do sort of feel like this could be a coming out party. We talked in the first segment. I said I want guys like Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum to go into this series and be like, we are going to show you that we are up there with the best of the best.
And that's ultimately how this will be decided, or how fast it goes, right? Like if Jayson Tatum comes out and he even said it before the season, getting that support from Durant at Team USA. But sometimes you have to go at your primary rival, your idol, to sway them, to show them, to give you that ultimate respect. And so I don't want Tatum to devolve this into a one-on-one versus Kevin Durant. But I do want him to go out there and be like, I want to show him the strides I've made in my game, that I am on the same level, that I'm in that top 5 conversation. If Jayson Tatum does that, that should help the Celtics get to the finish line. And then if you're Tatum and Brown, you should have some motivation just seeing Kyrie and knowing, Tatum said it today. Kyrie has admitted that maybe he would have done some stuff differently when he was here. And part of it was putting all the blame on the younger guys and constantly reverting back to that. If I'm Marcus Smart, Jayson Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, I can't not remember that in this series and be like, you didn't want to be here. You didn't want to be part of this. And to go out there and show them like, hey, we don't need you now. And so that's their challenge. And then they can't get overwhelmed by it and the storylines of this, but they should try to be showing them the progress they've made.
Alex, there's certainly no shortage of motivation for the Celtics, but what at this point in their careers is the motivation for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, who, as you said, they're both already NBA champs. They're both already considered 2 of the best players all time in this league.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going off of some of what Chris was saying, Kyrie Irving left the Celtics, which, again, many thought at the time were kind of built to win a championship with him, Jaylen, and Jayson for the Nets. And this would be year 3 of this we're in, and right now they have, there was the bubble, obviously, and then they have a second-round playoff exit. So if the Celtics were to knock them out, or even if they were to go to the next round and lose to Milwaukee, I mean, the expectations are championship or bust, and they really haven't come close to a championship when you think about it. So I think there's plenty of motivation. Having grown up in the area, I mean, this is a Knicks city. And, a lot of people, when Kyrie and Kevin signed with the Nets, were thinking the Nets. They're going there? Don't you mean the Knicks? So I think there's plenty to prove in terms of them justifying their decision. And, it's funny, Kyrie was talking about the Celtics earlier in the year, about Jaylen and Jayson, how, I knew these guys when they were pups, and now look at them. And I feel like you can't help but think about what could have been had he stayed. And, he might be judged in some ways as to what the Celtics go on to do without him versus what he does with the Nets.
Oh, 100%.